Hi there folks, my name's James Dash and I'm the course leader for music technology. What we're going to do in this short taster video is give you an insight into one of the topics we do in music technology, which is mixing. The first thing to think about is, what is mixing? It might be a term that you're familiar with if you've worked in any DAW such as Logic or Pro Tools or Cubase, but essentially what mixing is taking a raw, unpolished track and enhancing the overall sound of it by using effects. So you might be aware of instances where perhaps you're in a band and you've recorded songs that you then want to release. After the recording, it then goes through a stage called mixing where, as I said, it's enhanced. Some of these effects that you may be familiar with might be reverb, EQ, panning, compression. There's many more. We're going to have a quick look at how you first of all go ahead on mixing a track and have a look at some of these effects that are the most common ones that you will be doing as part of the course. Okay, so just a few things to consider out. First one is frequency. Try not to get too bogged down in the physics of it here, but just to think about for the time being is all sound is frequency, from the sound of my voice to any sounds that might be happening as you're watching this video. It is all frequency. Frequency is given a number and they go from extremely low frequencies such as 10 Hertz all the way up to extremely high frequencies such as 20 kilohertz. You might be aware of that 20 kilohertz is the extent of human hearing. So if you're ever aware of the phenomenon of perhaps dog whistles, how that essentially works is they're playing a frequency that dogs can hear, but we cannot because they're above 20 kilohertz. When we apply this to mixing, all instruments will have frequency content. Some of them might have more stronger presence in bass frequencies, whereas some of them might have more presence in mid-range. Some of them might have more presence in high-end. So for instance, if you think of a bass instrument like a bass guitar or a tuba or a kick drum, the strength of their sound is going to be in the bass area of frequencies, which tend to be between about 20 to 100 Hertz. Now this is something we're going to think about, particularly when we get to mixing, think about EQ. So before we talk about EQ, we're going to apply it to a drum kit. So this is how the drums I'll be playing in a moment have been recorded. So imagine this is a drum kit in a studio, and usually a drum kit is recorded using 4 microphones. We have a microphone on the kick drum, we have a microphone on the snare drum here, and then we have 2 microphones called overheads at the top. And what the overheads do is they not only capture the cymbals of the drum kit, but also the entire thing to give it a big 3D image. Okay, so what we have here is a fully recorded track with drums, guitars, bass and vocals. What we're going to do is have a look at just EQing the drums. So I'll just play for you the entire drum kit as it's recorded. Okay, let's move on to EQ, which is short for equalization. You might be familiar with this if you are a guitarist, and you might be aware of EQ on your amplifiers, or if you have a stereo, maybe your parents have a stereo at home, you might see an EQ system on that. Essentially what EQ allows us to do is to enhance or reduce the strength of certain frequencies. What we're going to do is just solo our kick drum. Just going to stick it on a loop so it's going to continually play. So this is the sound of just the kick drum mic. Hopefully you can see this image here. Every time the kick drum plays, we can see this line moving. That's what frequencies exist within this track and how strong they are. So the higher they're appearing on the graph, the louder those frequencies are. What we want to do is consider, first of all, how do we want our kick drum to sound? As this is the song we're focusing on is Stacey's Mum. which is like a pop rock song. Tend to be with this style, we want our kick drum to have a lot of low end depth so it really punches through our song. So what we're going to want to do is focus on boosting those frequencies. With EQ, I've got these bands here that I can move up and down. Essentially what that's doing is boosting a particular frequency area, and how much I'm boosting it by. I can make it much thinner, so it's only boosting a smaller range of frequencies, or if I wanted to capture a much bigger range, I could widen it. So hopefully we could see there, as I was increasing different frequencies within this kick drum, we could hear the sound of it changing. As I said, what I'm going to do is keep my ears open until I feel like I'm boosting the low end punch and attack of the kick drum. Once I've found that, I'm perhaps going to reduce my boost to a bit more of a subtle amount, because I don't want to go too crazy and make it really overpowering. Okay, so I found that usually you can find that area of a kick drum around about 80 Hertz, but it might be a tiny bit higher or less. What I want to do now is think about any frequencies in this kick drum that might be unpleasant, and I can use EQ to try and get rid of those. Quite a lot of the time with a lot of instruments, particularly kick drum, you have frequencies from between 200 and 500 Hertz. These are called mids, because they appear usually in the middle of the frequency spectrum. These mids are usually quite unpleasant. They tend to sound quite boxy, like this if you speak with your hand over your mouth, and they get in the way of the low end impact of our kick drum. So what I'm going to do is, again, use my ears, try and find any frequencies I think don't complement the sound of it and reduce them. So by doing so, I'm not only getting rid of frequencies that are unpleasant, I'm also bringing more attention to what I want to capture in the kick drum, which is this low end attack. If we were doing this for real, we'd spend much more time on it and try and use our ears until we much more thoroughly until we found what we were after. What we're going to have a look at next is a really important mixing effect, which is called reverb. So reverb is a natural phenomenon. You might, if you don't know what it means, you certainly would have heard it before. If you imagine speaking in your bedroom compared to if you were in a big cathedral or a big hall and speaking, or if you just clapped your hands, you'd probably be able to guess how the sound would be different. You would hear, compared to if you clapped in your room to if you clapped in a big hall or a big cathedral, you'd hear a lot of delay and a lot of what's called reverberation on the sound. What reverb does, which occurs naturally, is it helps to give our tracks a lot more life and a lot more depth, as if they were recorded in a live environment rather than a soundproofed studio. What we're going to do is put some reverb on the snare drum here. So I'm just going to play my snare drum without any reverb for now. Okay, now what I'm going to do is start to send that snare to a reverb unit. I'll turn it up by quite a lot just to demonstrate how it sounds, and I'll bring it back down to some perhaps more of a suitable level. So that's with a lot of reverb on it. and now with a much more subtle amount. So the aim here is not to make it sound like it was recorded in St. Paul's Cathedral. It's just to give it a bit more life and a bit more depth, so that drum kit has much more character to it in the grand scheme of an entire song. We'd also add reverb to things like our overheads. We might add reverb to our guitar and our vocals. We would tend to leave reverb off of bass instruments such as our kick drum and our bass guitar, because that might get in the way of the impact that those instruments are giving to our song. Okay, another thing we're going to look at is panning. Panning is really important to mixing, and what it does is it allows each instrument to have more space within a pair of speakers. If you imagine if you're listening to this on a pair of headphones, or even outside of your laptop speakers, you have a left and a right, just like you have a left and a right ear. Essentially what panning does is we're telling how much out of the left and right speaker do we want a sound to come. Do we want it to come completely equal amounts, both left and right? Do we want it to come a little bit more out of the right speaker than the left? Do we want it to come completely out of the left speaker and not at all with the right speaker? So we've got our electric guitar here, which we would equally use other effects like EQ and reverb on to make it sound better. We're just going to use it to demonstrate panning at the moment. So if I pan my guitar all the way to the left, it's only going to be coming out the left speaker. Now if I pan it all the way to the right, so how we would use panning in a mixing position is we might decide to have some instruments that are really important to the track down the centre, like our kick drum, our bass guitar, that are really going to give us a good low end depth and really important to the rhythm of the song. But things such as our guitar or any keyboards, anything like that, we might decide to have slightly panned either to the left or to the right. And what that means is that we haven't got lots of instruments all fighting for space down the centre. We're giving everything its own space, so therefore everything is as audible as each other. So I hope you enjoyed that. That was just a brief taster of what you're going to be looking at if you chose to study music technology. Of course, we take this process to much further depths and much more sophisticated levels. So I hope you enjoyed it and hope to see you soon. Thank you.